So what are the collaboration applications? Like, what are the services that we care about delivering to our users? And in the kind of traditional phone and voicemail model, dial tone, that's the first and foremost thing, enables our communication. Attendant console, that person who's an operator, they need to route calls. That's what attendant console is. The voicemail to email function, it's pretty much expected on a modern system that it has the ability to do that. And all the solutions we might talk about today do indeed do that. Call flows and auto attendance. That's what happens when somebody calls your phone system and there is something that is not a person perhaps that picks up the call, has a recording, gives some options. They can be as simple as just that, like an answering machine, or they can be a multi-step, multi-menu thing. And then analog and legacy, so dealing with the stuff, the old stuff. And I say old, I mean Alexander Graham Bell. It literally does go back that far. But that stuff has worked so well for so long that it's still there. We still see POTS lines, we still see PRIs. So moving on to soft phone, so that is just a phone that lives in software. You can use it on your computer, on mobile OS like iPhone, Android. That's what a soft phone is. And it basically allows you to have those functions on something that you want to have, not just a desk phone. It's terms. Survivability, and that is when you have components of your collaboration system that can still work when certain lines of communication are cut off. So maybe you have a phone system, call manager, PBX in one building, you've got a WAN connection over to another building, and there's phones in both. WAN connection gets cut, you would think the phones would just lose connection to the PBX, but with survivability features, you can still get a dial tone. Instant messaging and team spaces. This is something that's really kind of developed a lot over the last 5 years. We went from the kind of AOL instant messenger sort of model, in the Cisco world that would be like Jabber, to like what we'll call the Teams approach. And with Teams, it's not just I'm having a text message chat with another person. It's okay, there might be 5 people in a special space where we can all chat, and it might be programmatic, right? There might be a subject that it's on. You can just pop a space up, get the people in it, talk about your thing, and then get rid of it when that thing is done. Or you can just keep it up there and it's just a topical space. These space-based communication platforms really kind of transformed the way we work in a lot of different ways. So that is definitely an important application. Paging and alerting, we won't dive into that too hard. I know we've got a lot of K-12 folks and education folks in the room. And you might care a lot about paging and alerting, and we'll touch on it here and there, but it is most certainly an application that we care about delivering in any of the solutions that we're talking about here. E911 is something else that has developed a lot over the past 5 years. It's not as simple as just letting people dial 911 anymore. There are a couple federal regulations that are around that. Carey's Law, the Ray-Baum Act, phases 1 and 2, and Alyssa's Law. And we'll talk about a little bit about compliance. And then finally, the rich meetings. So, in a post-pandemic world, it's still here. It's still important. But during that time, we all realized, hey, yeah, these rich meetings, these meetings where you can see the other people, where you can see the content that they're sharing, you can whiteboard on it. The rich meetings is now a component of collaboration that we all expect our collab platforms to deliver. Okay, so we'll talk about a couple of the different architectural models, like a high-level view of what that looks like in a network, and then we'll move on. So this would be a traditional on-premise collab system. In the Cisco world, that's the Unified Communications Manager, Unity Connection, all that stuff. I'm not going to say those words a whole lot. This is mostly what are the service platforms that these things are delivering. So we have call control, right? All the phones dialing, routing calls, voicemail, that's pretty That's pretty explanatory. Instant messaging, yeah, it is what it is. Then paging, alerting, E911, I kind of group those together because sometimes they can come together. And then I'll say endpoints there, right? It's the obvious, the phones, the video units, you know, your analog telephone adapters, fax machines, yes, still fax machines. Here's a couple other ones though. PSTN gateway, that is how your phone system connects to the outside telephone world. We've got, I think, a lot of customers that will have a primary and a secondary, either have some load balancing or a failover location. It can go either way. Survivability gateway. So survivability gateway and PSTN gateway can be the same thing, but generally it is that gateway. And you know, usually we're talking about like a Cisco, like ISR 4000 or a Catalyst, one of the newer ones. That's the platform, the hardware that the survivability features are served from. So, you know, essentially lose connection to the phone system. If you have one of these things, it can essentially become a very simple phone system. It can let you dial out, it can let you get some calls. It's limited, but it's there. It lets you get dial tone when you need it. Then finally, edge gateway. And this is something that we will touch on a little bit later when we talk about enabling the remote workers, the hybrid workers out there, because the edge gateway is a generic term. The edge gateway is a platform that allows that collaboration fabric to be extended outside of the corporate network. So you can basically have the same functionality outside as you can have inside. When I say that, I mean the soft phones will work over the internet, and the hardware devices, desk phones, will work over the internet if you can provide them power. And it doesn't use a VPN to do this, and we'll get into what it is that thing is doing a little bit later. Okay, so I almost don't need a slide for this, but when we're talking about a full cloud collaboration system, in essence, there is really only one kit of parts that lives on your premise, and that's the endpoints right there. So we went from one extreme to the other. The full gamut of all the servers that do all the things for all the phones everywhere, and then this, soft phones, desk phones, they just talk to the internet. And boiled down, you know, that is a cloud collaboration platform right there. However, we see the sweet spot as generally being something in between the two. And so I also cover what an on-premise system looks like with cloud components, what a cloud system looks like with on-prem components, and maybe why you would want one over the other. So in this case, we've got the cloud-based mix. And so in the cloud, we have services like, you know, call control, voicemail, instant messaging, the collaborative spaces. But optionally, we have a couple things that live on the premise. Number one, the PSTN gateway. So when I talk about the cloud calling system, in the Cisco world, this is WebEx. WebEx calling, right? WebEx is a brand that has a lot of different technologies kind of under its belt. And so you might hear WebEx meetings. You know, it's been rebranded under all WebEx, but it was called WebEx meetings, WebEx calling. And this is WebEx calling. And essentially what this is the PBX, the phone system, is in Cisco's data center. It is a, you know, distributed PBX system across the country and across the globe for that matter. However, with WebEx calling, you can opt to use an on-premise gateway and have your own SIP trunk, and that is the way that your phones connect to the PSTN, the outside telephone world. That is optional. You can also have that terminated in the cloud. But if you already have, you know, like SIP trunks, so you can have PSTN connectivity, you can bring that. You can bring that along. If you already have an investment in, you know, some Cisco routers and those SIP trunks, cool. We can use it, and you can run WebEx calling off of it. Again, survivability gateway. This is definitely kind of one of the killer features about WebEx calling, because you would think, you know, a cloud collaboration system, you lose contact to the internet, no more dial tone. And in actuality, in the same way, in the on-prem world, you have those survivability features. The same thing can also be used for WebEx calling. And then paging and alerting. And this is kind of where we see a lot of interest in the education space. You know, there's some folks out there lobbying for some regulations with like panic buttons, you know, requiring them to be in schools. It's not something that has happened yet, but there's some momentum. Some folks trying to lobby for that. So things like panic buttons for school alerting. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask on the cloud, how does that survivability gateway work if you don't have the internet, I guess? How does that work? Does it have a cell connection backup or what?
Yeah, so it can work in a couple different ways. What you just described there, the cell connection backup, that is a way to get an alternate connection to the internet. And so in that case, that would be, you know, more of an infrastructure connection. But in the VoIP world, we're talking about a backup PSTN connection. So, you know, those analog lines, the POTS lines, as it were, if you have those, and if you have a gateway on site, that can become alive when your cloud system loses connection to the internet, and then those POTS lines can then serve your phones. You know, a lot of people don't have like backup PRIs, but essentially any PSTN connection could fulfill that. In the on-prem world, we call that SRST, so survivable remote site telephony, and then in the WebEx world, it's just survivability. All right, so kind of going back to the paging, WebEx calling has a paging solution built into it. It is relatively basic. It's more for paging groups of folks. For the full-featured paging alerting, the really highly customizable, we deal mostly with a product called Fusion or Informacast by SingleWire, and that it will work with both an on-premise and a cloud system. In both cases, though, there is a server, there's an appliance that sits on-premise to anchor multicast traffic. So that system will run over multicast. So that was a cloud-based system with on-prem parts. Here's an on-prem system with some cloud parts. And I like this one a lot because a lot of us are coming from an on-prem system and we're just maybe thinking about cloud, or like, what can cloud do for me? And this model kind of addresses that. So on-prem, we still have call control, voicemail. We have the PSTN gateway, the survivability gateway, or endpoints. These are still where they are. Our edge gateway, which I'll talk about later. But in this case, we have instant messaging and E911 as a cloud service. And we do that because there are some advantages we get for that. So say you want to take your instant messaging platform everywhere with you. Take it home, take it if you commute, and with something like WebEx, you can still anchor calls on the premise. They'll work out on the internet, they'll work in your home, and you can also have the instant messaging, the collaborative team spaces, the meetings. That is provided by cloud because it's an easy cloud platform. And it practically comes with, like, the call manager. And then again, with E911, it makes sense to have something like that in the cloud because if you have soft phones, you have nomadic users now, people moving around using telephony services. And to be compliant with the RABOM Act Phase 2, those nomadic folks need a way to locate them if they are roaming about. And when you have E911 platform in the cloud, it's already set up to track others over the internet, to be able to hold a database of the addresses, the street addresses where these people may be roaming to. And again, with the paging, this is the same platform that we were talking about in the previous slide. There's an on-premise element here, an anchor point, an appliance that runs to anchor multicast traffic. But in the case of a product like Fusion, the dashboard, the configuration dashboard for that thing, much like Meraki, the configuration dashboard is in the cloud, and it can be accessed with the web browser from anywhere.